So this is the Gate and Bar podcast, the GAB podcast, and this is the second episode of our business series. And I'm joined today by Andrew Southey. We've worked together quite a lot on quite a lot of schemes.
We have.
And we sort of jumped ship from employment to self-employment, starting our own business at around about the same time as well. So it's been there's been some nice collaboration, and watch out for this in the business world as well as the sort of technical world as well. So we'll jump straight into it. I'll let Andrew sort of introduce himself and what he's doing at the moment, and then I'd like to jump back to how you got into architecture, how it all started, what inspired you to get into the world of construction and design.
There's a long story for you.
Yeah.
So I am a chartered architect, RIBA chartered architect. I had to look it up this morning. I actually joined the register in December 2002.
Wow.
Yeah. So
is that showing your age?
It shows my age. No,
showing
I don't
your
give
experience.
I give nothing away. So that period of time came off the back of being at Leeds University, or the School of Architecture, Brunswick, and then did the usual bits and pieces, went through professional, and then now as a point sole practitioner. So in between a varied history of experience in different practices, and then we sort of joined forces off the back of me being at SDA Architects in Leeds and you being at Mac.
Yeah. And
thrown together in the first part of one of the projects, and we've been on from there. Yeah. So now I've been sole practitioner for wherever we are now, 2.5 years, which has been a learning curve. Yeah. Remains a learning curve. And I'm sure we'll discuss how that came about, but there are quite a few lessons to be learnt, I think, that are valuable for people.
Yeah, definitely. So should we jump back? Because we've done an episode on all the guys in the office, how they got into building surveying, which was quite interesting because there was no story that was the same. And I assume it's similar with architecture. People get into architecture for all different reasons.
Yeah.
It's unlike building surveying and more of the consultancy side. Architecture's a bit more, shall I say highbrow?
You can say highbrow, yes.
It's more known, isn't it?
It is more known.
As a career in school, everyone knows what an architect is.
They think they do. I think there was the days of the 80s Porsche driving, red braces type, yuppie type professional. I don't believe that's ever the case, but there is I haven't got mine. Yeah, there is a niche. Yeah, your cravat and all that. There's a look.
The maroon Maserati.
That's it. Yeah. There's a look, and I think that wasn't my aspiration. My dad was a draftsman. He worked for Taylor Wimpey's, and then as he got older and we grew up as a family, he went into partnership with a small building contractor. Ended up doing the drawings for the builder. I ended up doing the labouring on the site over the summer holidays, watched what he did, and then there was the opportunity of university, which was the standard academic route, GCSEs, A-levels, and then onwards. And he said, go to university if you can and do better than a self-taught draftsman, which is what he was.
Was this drawing boards and?
Oh, this was pre-CAD. Pre-CAD, yeah. In fact, my granddad was also an engineer for British Steel and did Fylingdales. So I've still got some of his vellum, blue pencil, green pencil, red pencil drawings, which are phenomenal. But that's really what it.
So exposed to it very early age, and saw the drawings on the drawing board and went, "Well, that's quite interesting."
It was more how it went together than design. So early days at university, I recognised I was not a artist in the sense of being some of the other people on the course were very much artistic.
Yeah,
you couldn't build it, but it looked fantastic. Yeah. I was the other way.
This is what I was struck with when I was at university, because I lived with an architect. So I was doing a building surveying degree, he was doing an architecture degree. We lived at the same time, so he was year one, and then we moved on to year two. And I think year one he spent drawing leaves and shells.
Yeah.
just to get the form right. And I was just like, because I was close to going into architecture, and I was like, oh, glad I didn't, because I would have just, that was me out. Like.
And part of what they try to do in the degree, with the first 3 years of your extended professional qualification period, is they try to free your mind up for design.
Yeah.
Now, the problem with that was I had spent the previous 10 plus years learning how to put things together. So I knew a brick, I knew what timber was, I knew modules of construction. And then to try and break that thought process to free your thinking was actually difficult. I would say I struggled, but I wasn't on that spectrum of being, a Daniel Libeskind or Tado Ando or whoever it was going to be at the time. And degree was great. Then did a year at Leeds City Council with John Thorpe, a civic architect, which was fantastic. He was a free thinker, a very slightly eccentric character, but absolutely brilliant.
He was a free thinker?
He was a free thinker.
I made it go together.
And I was really on that learning curve. They were just planning Leeds City and the civic gateways into the city. And they were still in the Merrion Centre at the time. And they were planning, what the architect who was mentoring me was just sorting out their new offices. So I was partly involved in that, the conversion of Leeds City markets, and then the gateways into. So it was great, and that was my first exposure to practice. They worked flexi time back then as well. Marvelous,
There's lots to be said about local authority.
There is. And I think they then had a full architects department. Proper architects department.
Upskill, which we're seeing less and less of now in local authority.
So that skill set has been now when you try and engage with a local authority, that's certainly missing. But they were a great team. I learned an awful lot from them. And then back to university for your postgraduate. So we're now into year 6 by the time you've qualified. You've done your postgrad. And then there was a further 12 months out in practice, which I joined a small practice in Wakefield for a period of time, and then moved to Halliday Clark over in Bradford at the time to do my experience and exams and all the rest of it. So
was that on purpose that you left local authority to go to a private practice to get that experience?
The local authority was great for exposure to lots of big design, but there was not the responsibilities, there was not the contractual learning curve, and there wasn't the exposure on site. So I wanted to go to a practice where you were going to get thrown in the deep end, and to be honest, I wanted a job. After being at the time, luckily it was pre-payment of fees, but you still racked up a substantial amount of borrowing just to live. So that meant I wanted to go out and work in practice. And Halliday Clark, I ended up being with them for about 14 years, from just qualified, associate, and then director, and then change of heart, and I moved on to somewhere else, which is what you do. There's lots of reasons for that. But that gave me great experience in running jobs. And that's how I landed in doing schools, which probably should have said at the outset was almost exclusively what I do is schools. So that was a period of time with, again, a great little team, some of which and still keep in contact with. And, they become your peers through the rest of your career.
Yeah.
So, schools is where I ended up starting and where I've ended up remaining, really.
So at Halliday Clark, how did that workload sort of pan out then? Did it start on schools and bits, or was it very varied and then you ended up finding yourself this nice little pigeonhole that you were quite good at?
There was a bit of both. At the time, Halliday Clark had a quite close relationship with the Diocese of Bradford.
Yeah.
And they were in the process of, building their first secondary school in 25 years, which was quite new for them. And the the design was very different, and to be fair, broke the mould of what schools had been before. So it was almost like a set of small village buildings that created a campus, which has been evolved since. And from that, I got involved quite early on in one of the buildings. I ended up working it up under the direction of Adam Clark as one of the founding directors, and we went on from there. And I enjoyed schools. We watched it get built, and then Bradford went through the 3 to 2 tier system of converting or taking out the middle schools and going from straight to junior to primary to secondary. Yeah. So that amalgamation of building stock meant we were involved with other practices in Bradford in converting all the schools, and we had a massive workload. And I was pushed into the forefront of that, which was the learning curve. Drawing it, watching it get built, being berated by the contractor because you'd not drawn what was expected. You learn, and that was really what put me into schools, and eventually managing a couple of guys in the office and then becoming director, and that was a very enjoyable period. Yeah,
it's no surprise that we do a lot of school work together, and when I say to people, we do a lot of schools, I think people in our industry think that it's all the same. How can you do schools forever? Because it's just classrooms and dining halls, and just the repetition. But I assume, especially with the Bradford jobs where they're amalgamating schools and reshuffling sites, I assume no job was ever the same. It's
no, that's true, and that is one of the enjoyable things about why I've retained or maintained doing education work. Is there was I'm old enough to have seen the full cycle of building schools for the future, academies, framework, standardisation, and there are a lot of practices out there who have done some excellent, beautiful architectural solutions for schools. Then the contractors got hold of them, and the National Contractors Framework standardised it, and there was a drive to reduce costs, standardise design, and it didn't interest me because it's a rubber stamp pattern book solution to sites, and there was an element of individuality to each school. But even now I'm seeing schools from as far apart as Milton Keynes to Burton-on-Trent, which are actually by the same architect, the same contractor, and have the same problems. Now, yes, it solves a problem like mass housing solves a problem, but it doesn't interest me. So what we did back in Bradford was adaptation of existing stock, and you get into learning about timetabling and faculties and the individual requirements of individual spaces, and you just accrue that knowledge to then apply that to different schools. And each school is its own family, and they all behave in a different way. Although they're not expected to, they all have their own traits. And so that keeps the freshness of when you hit a school. You go in with an open mind because no two schools are the same.
So Halliday Clark,
yes,
SDA. How long were you at SDA for? Because that's where we crossed.
It is, about 5 years. So I left Halliday Clark because I was getting a bit stale, and that's...
How long were you at Halliday Clark for?
14 years. So I was director. We were looking at doing a buyout or a buy into the business, and it didn't work out in the way that I wanted it to work out. So I looked for a change of scenery, was made an offer by SDA to join them. They were predominantly a automotive based business.
Car
showrooms. They were on the supply chain for Jaguar Land Rover and Audi and VW Skoda, all that sort of thing. So they did a lot of work. They were very proficient in Revit, BIM work, and I joined them to bring education, to diversify what they did as a business. And that had some positives and some negatives. It was difficult to turn the ship sometimes. There were 3 other directors who had already done what they'd done. I was the newbie, trying to bring in a level of freshness that, it was a challenge.
And bringing in something that they inherently probably didn't understand. a completely different client, completely different construction process.
Absolutely. Even the design process, where you take a standard Audi terminal and you've done one before, and there's your pattern book, you replicate it, it fits on the site. It's great. There's a standardized fee profile that goes with it, and an invoicing profile, which is very different to the way schools work and are treated as a business. So it took a little bit of time to mesh. But what I did learn from there was the sharp end of the business.
Yeah.
I learnt and got better connections, which allowed my knowledge and interconnectivity with other consultants and contractors to go outside the region. So Halliday Clark was predominantly Yorkshire based, give or take. SDA were nationwide and into Ireland, and had a sister spin-off company in California, all off the back of the Jaguar Land Rover. Yeah. But I learned some bits from that, and we got to a point, and then there was the economic side of things that happened, and globally with the Dieselgate, there was the economic crash towards the back of 2019, and the business dropped away from the automotive, and as a business, it struggled. The education stuff kept going, but was never going to be enough to prop things up. So I took a view, and I know you've covered this in an earlier podcast, about when's the right time to set up. And it was never on my career path to be a sole practitioner.
Was it not? It never...
No.
Because it sounds like at Halliday Clark you were close to gaining equity, having a role in the business. So, it's very similar in traditional surveying practices where that's the goal. You've got your name above the door and you own a slice of the business. That's like the pinnacle of...
I think it might have been, and I've enjoyed... It's that natural aspiration of your career path. But what I was finding, it was particularly evident at SDA, was I wasn't involved in the projects. So you do the front end, you'd meet the client, you'd set up the design, but you'd have somebody with you, and the projects then were almost handed over, and you went out to do the next one. It was the traditional business model.
Yeah.
And I felt with some of the clients, which particularly a case in point was Bradford Grammar School, where I'd done work with Halliday Clark, did some with SDA. I was losing that relationship, and I was getting calls from the head or the premises manager to say, "Are you coming to? We've got this issue," and I'm not aware of it. And it was a learning curve, because those people those other specialists within SDA hadn't had that responsibility and didn't understand what it was that they needed to do to report problems or to talk about the issues.
Handholding.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's in...
Is that from an inherent how that business was set up historically to deal with their other workload? Or is that, do you think, just a wider thing within architecture practice?
I think it's a wider thing in industry, as much as that practical experience of, as I said, I got it by default at Halliday Clark because I was on site and we had so much work that you had to do it. You had to step up and deal with the problem. In bigger practices, and SDA was a bigger practice, it was 20 plus when I joined it, there were a lot of people that never went to site.
Yeah.
They never understood what happened to their drawings when they went out the door. Somebody was a site man or woman that dealt with a problem, converted the drawings with a contractor and got it built. And I think that skill set is critical, because if you can't understand what you've drawn and how it's built, you repeat the same problem time and time and time again.
Yeah.
And that's where the mistakes happen. So,
and that's purely from a design point of view. From a client care point of view, not having that continuity from start to finish.
Yeah.
For them, the project could run completely smoothly, and you'll get away with it.
Well, let's put it this way: in all those years, I think I've probably had two projects that went what I'd call smoothly. There's always a problem, and it's how you deal with the problem. And some people avoid tackling the problem because it's difficult, and if you do that, it only compounds the problem, costs money, it costs time, and suddenly you're in the spotlight.
We call that bottom drawing. Just put it in the bottom drawer because it's too hard to deal with.
Yeah. And if you tackle it, I think, and if you've made a mistake, you front up, and you deal with it. So that level of I suppose ability was missing, and that's not being, that sounds critical of those particular people who, if they're watching this podcast, might not be, and it's not.
It's the way the business.
It's the way the business was, and the training they'd had.
Yeah, and it's one of those. And from a purely selfish business point of view, someone will be really good at that technical tender level drawing. Yep. So let's sit them there doing that over and over again. If they're not very good at working out the details on site with the contractor, get someone else in that is.
Absolutely.
From a business sense, you can see it. It makes absolute sense to do it like that. But from a personal progression, rounded person, it doesn't make any sense. And from a client care point of view, it doesn't make any sense.
No, and it goes back to what did I want to do, and I came to a point, and I was sufficiently embedded in the business to understand where it was going to go, and it wasn't difficult to predict that by the back end of 2019, moving into 2020, there was going to be some problems.
Yeah. So just jumping back, did you join SDA then as equity director?
I joined as a director. I did then pay equity. For equity. As one of the other directors retired, I joined as the fifth, and one of the directors retired and came out of the business, and I came in to try and sort of balance the 4 points of the organisation. And as I say, it had potential at face value. That wasn't realised. I've looked back at it since and thought, was it a mistake? I can't say it's a mistake, because what it put me through then gave me the springboard to do what I'm doing now. Had I not gone to SDA and had it worked with Halliday Clark, I probably would still be a director at Halliday Clark. But them's the breaks. And that's what happens. So what ended up, what happened is, as where the back end of 2019 happened, I had some conversations at home. I had some conversations with my parents, with a couple of other people that I was working with.
Really interesting, because the previous podcast in this series was the things you can do whilst you're employed to not make it a success, but give it the best chance that it's got. It's interesting there that you touched on family, other half, before clients, colleagues.
Yes. Because there's a responsibility, isn't there? If you're used to a paycheck and you've built your life on what you think you're going to get, then there's a massive risk on that, because if you don't get it and it doesn't work out, you've got no safety net.
What did you get from your other half on it?
She was very pragmatic in that I wasn't happy. And others had said to me, well, you're doing it for them, why can't you do it for yourself? And what then triggered it is at the back end of 2019, when the economic climate was such that SDA was floundering, I had to take a financial hit. So for a fair period of time, I was either not getting paid or getting paid a great reduction in what I would generally expect to be doing.
Which was, at the time, I think was fairly broad brush in the industry, wasn't it? Especially those companies that worked predominantly in sectors that had been really affected by COVID. And
well, that's really what then really sealed it for me, was that we then came into. I took a view over Christmas 2019 into 2020 and thought, right, I'm going to go for it. And I had an offer of a project, doing a project under my own guise, which I ended up giving it was a contractor D&B schoolwork. I gave them some advice. I helped them with their tender, and they won the tender. And I still do a lot of work with the contractor, and that was out of the region. That was in the south. And they said to me, well, just do it yourself. We know how we're going to build it. we know what we need you for is the school's expertise. Put your fee in, tell us what you want, we'll make it work. So in that month of January into early February was the crash course in, oh my God, I need to get insurance. Yeah. I need to get PI. I need to register myself as a sole practitioner. I need to have accounts. I need to do all the things that other businesses have done, but I need to do it in 4 weeks.
Yeah.
And because basically I was just sort of ticking along doing the schoolwork for SDA, I got that together. The bid went in with the contractor. As I say, they won the bid in mid-February, by which point I made a submission and resigned from SDA, which didn't go down well, as expected. Then what happened is that March the 24th or 25th, COVID came. So I was effectively on garden leave from SDA, and I never saw them again after that.
Wow.
I never saw them again. I had no contact. I was sort of abandoned, which, looking back on it, seems quite harsh, but actually was fantastic for me because I said, this is what I'm going to do.
Give you clear space.
And gave me clear space.
Yeah.
And the other, there was a little, shall we say, legal dialogue had, which moved on from there, which was particularly unpleasant and a little controversial, but anyway, was resolved, and I came out the other end of that sort of 6 months of garden leave, having had an element of pay through the COVID process, through furlough, because I was still delivering in the background projects for those that were still being retained properly by the business. And the first questions that came back from the clients is, why isn't Andrew here? For which they had to give an answer. And I then, after my 6 months, was deep into this new project down in the south. And then I got a raft of inquiries and contact from clients.
Wondering where you've gone.
Wondering where I've gone and why hadn't they been told, and this is awful. And so it went on from there. And that was the springboard for me as Andrew Southey architect.
Yeah. So that separation process from employment to self-employment, or from employment to employment, that the way that conventional consultancies, architecture practices deal with that always seems to be the same to me, and never really seems to be right. And it might just be my biased opinion because I've always been on one side of it rather than the other. But there always seems to be this, don't tell the client until we absolutely have to.
Yeah.
And let's eke it out for as long as we possibly can. Rather than, and I offered it when I left the practice in York, I said, let me know. I sat with the senior director and I said, let me know when you want to go and see the clients so we can properly hand over. No, why are we doing that? We'll just wait until they ring or email and then we'll tell them.
Absolutely.
Which seems odd, but at the same time fairly helpful if someone is setting up on their own.
I think there was a protection of what was deemed to be the client base and the alleged the future fee generation from that client. But as I've experienced, the basis of that relationship is built between the people, the individuals. It's not an entity that the client, particularly on schools, is signing up to. It's not the practice, it's the individual that they engage with to solve their problems. And as you've just said, some of the meetings I had early when I left, particularly with SDA, handing over with a client to say, Andrew's not dealing with it anymore, we are, was met with...
Who is?
Yeah. And was reassuring that I'd done something right, that those people were going to defend me and did move with me to another practice.
I touched on that. You can never guarantee it, and you can never float the idea with clients going, if I jump ship, are you coming? No. It can't be done. It's all this weird grey area that you have a feeling that they will.
Yes.
And it'd be great if they did. Yeah. And you do everything in your power too that you're allowed to.
Yeah.
But there's no absolute.
There is no absolute,
and I think you just need to make sure that you're 99.9% confident that one will come along fairly quickly to pay the bills fairly quickly.
Yeah.
I assume you weren't in the fortunate position where you could do 6 months and not pay yourself.
I'd already done 6 months prior to that without not being suitably paid, and that was another one of those drivers that, in that real light of day in early January, post-Christmas, heading towards birthday at the end of January, was, well, what are you going to do? Because there's a new year coming and it's not going to get any better. The COVID stuff was bubbling around in the background. The workload for SDA was trickling along, but the opportunity for me was actually far greater. And I almost had nothing to lose because I could do another 6 months without getting paid, for which point I'd be in real trouble.
Yeah.
Well, would have been in real trouble. So taking the opportunity to go and do it for myself, I had nothing to lose.
Had the situation at SDA been different, do you think you'd be set up on your own now?
A good question. Ultimately, yes, because that was a body that was not going to change the way it did what it did. And I was getting even to the point prior to that where I was becoming removed from the work that I enjoyed doing. So job satisfaction, all right, it was a job. It was great, in and out of Leeds, blah, blah, blah. That was all fine. But the actual doing the job, I was getting bored. And I suppose I could have got to the point heading towards being the grand old age of 50 where I could have been sat back, playing golf, going out on the bike, all those sorts of things, doing the social,
up on the desk.
Doing the business development side of it. But that didn't really appeal. It really didn't appeal. So
you wanted to be an architect. So.
I wanted to be an architect. I wanted to enjoy the problem solving, and I think that the engagement that what SDA did give me was this exposure to, which I'm sure will come on to, businesses and workload outside of the region. And there's a particularly rich belt of, richness, if I want to have a better description, around North London, north of the M25, sort of running up to Milton Keynes, where we did quite a bit of work from the automotive side, and the contractors down there did a lot of D&B.
Yeah.
And those D&B contractors were then involved with local authorities and schools. Schools would go to them and say, well, we want to build a new X, Y, and Z. They could go, right, we can build it, but we can't design it.
Yeah.
And that's how that early dialogue with contractors went. Yeah. And because I'd always enjoyed drawing and building, I don't have any problem talking to a contractor. And again, go back to what we said earlier, there are other people that don't like engaging with a contractor. So I had no issues with that sort of dialogue. And that was what gave me the confidence to then go, do you know what, I'm going to step away and give it a go.
Yeah. So let's jump forward then. So you've got that first contract, working on contractor side, set up the business.
Yeah.
I assume it didn't take you long to come up with the name.
Yeah. Well, I did have a bit of, there's nothing like originality, is there? I did toy with being a studio something, or something with an arty-farty name.
Punch in the face that I am an architect, yeah.
And I spoke to somebody, and a couple of people actually, and said to it, they said, well, why don't you just trade under your name? Because that's what everybody wants to deal with. Are you going to be anything bigger than you? And at the time, and probably still haven't got that drive to be anything bigger. So I traded under my name. So the first 6 months was as a sole practitioner, and then with some further advice, it turned up to be a limited company.
Yeah.
And that's how it's gone from there.
Yeah. So now we work together on a number of schools up in the north. You're working down south on loads of projects, bigger projects.
Yes.
The funding environment in education seems to have this very definitive north-south divide. Absolutely. We're struggling up here at Gate Bar because we've decided that we don't travel very far. That we're struggling rubbing two peas together for buildings that should be funded but end up not getting funded.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I won't be too bitter about it.
No, but you're right. You're very right.
You found a nice niche down there doing some lovely education, sixth form.
Yeah.
That.
Yeah, it is a, well, the north-south divide's real.
Mm.
It's so evident, and off the back of the education side of things, it's because there's huge residential expansion down there. There's Section 106 money that's available. There are people moving there, therefore there are children want to go to school, therefore there are places, therefore there's expansion. Mm. It's as simple dynamic as that, and that is readily available. And there's more work than there's people to do it. Yeah. There are some people doing it down there that are doing it very badly, who are building things and designing things that are not great. Yeah. And off the back of the first couple of projects with contractors and with basically word of mouth, my workload's probably 60% down there and 40% up here. Yeah. And through that, probably into about 12, 15 months into being backwards and forwards, I met up with another building surveyor, a bit like your good self.
Mm. Another Andrew,
which keeps it dead easy.
Yeah. Do you just have one email address?
Almost. Yeah. If somebody shouts Andrew, one of us answers. Yeah. And he'd come into he was as a building surveyor, chartered surveyor. He was part of a valuation business, but doing a lot of schools. And he'd come from a practice a bit like you had, which specialised in schools and SIF funding. Yeah. He wanted to do it on his own. We got together by coincidence, like we did, on a school project, and we've subsequently partnered up and set up a new little practice, for want of a better description, delivering specifically schoolwork. He goes in, does fire doors, asbestos removal, decarbonisation, solar PV, and off the back of that is an inquiry of we'd like to renovate this or expand that, and we now do a one-stop shop for architecture and building surveying.
Yeah, which is ECP.
Which is ECP, the Education Consultancy Partnership.
Which took a bit longer to think about than...
Well, it was, pick a name, 3-letter acronym. The usual.
Love a TLA, you
know. You got to have it. You got to have it.
Do you know what put me off having a TLA 3-letter acronym as a company name? Was our presentation, when we were both in employment, our presentation to the Diocese of Leeds for Glidegate.
Really?
Because we were sat there, I was at MAC, 3-letter acronym, you were at STA, 3-letter acronym, the engineer was a 3-letter acronym,
yes.
The M&E consultant was a 3-letter acronym, the acoustic guy was a 3-letter acronym, the measured survey guy was a 3-letter acronym. I just thought, coming off the back of this, how is the Archdeacon of the Diocese going to remember who is who? Yeah. You know, this isn't his day job. He's here to listen to us. No. And I've just filled this lovely PowerPoint presentation with a load of acronyms. I just thought, I can't do it. And 9 times out of 10, the acronym is just some old boy's name that doesn't work there anymore. Yeah. Anyway, yours is quite good.
Well, it's okay. I mean, it's trying to find something that schools believe in, and it's the bit that we try and create is the partnership bit, because a lot of it's long haul. Yeah. In the region down there, again, although you're local, Yorkshire local, we're sort of around the band of Hertfordshire, Buckinghamshire, up to Milton Keynes a little bit, which is regional, and it happens to be quite a rich vein of opportunity. Yeah. Some of it has the same problems as we have up here, but there is a readiness to fund, which is different to up here.
So you found this nice, I'll say niche, but education work is very wide ranging. But you found this, let's go with niche.
Yeah.
Down south, in the north, education projects, 2 businesses that you've set up and running. How do you split your time between
it's difficult.
Your own, the partnership that you're running down south? What fits in what box? What doesn't?
Yeah, I think it's going to come to a head. There is the north-south split is the north-south split for the businesses. Yeah. There are clients up here, school clients that I've brought from the previous practices that I will continue to deliver for. And in some instances, on the D&B side, the D&B on schools don't necessarily want to employ or have the name on the drawings as a partnership, which also deals in education consultancy, because some of the clients that are also part of that design team are other education consultancies, and they don't want to feel challenged. So
de-risks it to have an
architect as an individual on there.
Yeah.
So there's that perception. I'm not sure where it's going to go. I'm totally honest. The splitting time tends to work. As I say, every couple of weeks there's 2 or 3 days down the south with Andrew. We're on the phone all the time. It's like a hotline north to south. The fact that when I set up, we all got into Teams, online working, what a godsend. And now everything is measured in my time, an hour's block where I know I can achieve half a drawing, 30 emails. I know then how my day's going to work out because I've got no one else really to rely on to do that element of work. With Andrew down in the south, his team of a couple of surveyors can do a lot of the legwork to go and look at the sites, take some photographs, ring me up on FaceTime and go, look at this looks good, bad or indifferent. We can solve stuff very quickly. I feel stretched sometimes in being able to attend all the sites in the way I'd like to attend the sites. Yeah. And that's the balance between now having done 2 full years of sort of accounts, as it were, business returns, you can actually see what you can physically do as a single person.
There's a ceiling.
There's a ceiling then that you can actually do as a turnover. Yeah. And I think that's...
Without cutting corners and lowering the standards.
Without working 24/7, and that's not what I want to do. There's other things I want to do.
Because this is the underlying, if anyone thinks setting up a consultancy is sort of like a get-rich-quick scheme, and I say it to the guys in the office all the time, the only thing we sell in various guises is our time.
Yeah.
Well, you can increase the time that you work and get a bit more benefit, increase the productivity to a point, but there'll always be this cap where we're not selling a product that we can sell 1 million of. There's 7 of us in the office. We've all got 7.5 hours in a day. We'll all do X number of things in that time. So there's a ceiling there, which brings me on to the difference. So me and you set up similar time. You were a little bit before me.
Yeah, I think we're about 6 months before you, I think.
And the difference here is that you set up knowing that it was going to be you, at least for the first part, and only you.
Yes.
And continues
to be only me.
To be you. Have you thought about...
Yes, I have thought. I think I thought and then went no.
Yeah.
That's a good question, and it's one I pose to myself every now and again, and we do when we catch up outside socially. Is that what do you do next? And part of me is reluctant to change the efficiency that I perceive I've got by introducing somebody who's not me, and that's a bit controlling.
Yeah, I get it. I get it 100%. Yeah,
giving over that. Who would I introduce them to? Is there enough work for that person? Because again, the responsibility of taking people on, as I found both SD and you must do now, is if you haven't got enough work and you have to start chopping salaries and laying people off, is a horrible experience. And having gone through a sort of a version of that myself, you understand the implications. So.
Yeah, the way I put it is I pay everyone's mortgage and rent first before the company makes money and before I make money.
Yeah, and
you've got to feed everyone in the office.
And it's quite selfishly looking after myself. I now know what I can do in a year. That year gives me a comfortable life. Yeah. I'm not going to be a millionaire off of it. I'm going to be working. You take a week off and you've got a lot of work to do before and after.
Work to do
and you take your laptop with you. I'm lucky that my family's of 2 lads are of an age where they're independent, so I'm not needing to be at home. Wife understands how the business works. She's been partnered with me long enough to know the flexibility of working of an evening, working of a weekend.
Yeah. And this is something I touched on in terms of like when to set up a business and making sure the timing works. So your 2 lads are, one's older,
18 and 14, yeah.
14. So they're, and I don't have any kids, I'll caveat that again, because I think I caveated that in the first one. So they're of an age where they don't take as much of your time up, they're fairly independent, they like to go out and have their, and you've got more time. And, I don't think any of us set up thinking, I can't wait to work every weekend under the sun. But you need to know that if you have to, you can.
Yeah. And you can see that the result of doing that keeps a project going and selfishly allows you to invoice it at the end of the month, which allows you to keep your cash flow going and pay your own bills. And I think that's the reality of it, because if you don't do it, then you don't get paid.
Yeah.
And that's probably the bit that gives me the sleepless nights, is what happens if.
Catastrophizing.
Yeah.
I'm really bad at that, and this is why I asked about what your partner said when you said, I'm setting up, because Kirsten said to me, she was a bit, just sort of said, why would you do that? Yeah, well-paid job. At the time I had a 20% pay cut because of COVID, all that rubbish. Well-paid job. I've not been there that long, been there 2 years.
Yeah.
What are you doing? And you almost need that sounding board.
You do.
If you don't have it yourself.
Yeah, you don't. But I was at a point where my safety net, which was SDA, wasn't actually there.
Yeah.
So then the worst case is, do you go and find another job, and then COVID happened, so there wasn't any job out there. Yeah. So then what do you do for the next, could have been 12 months, and inevitably was 12 months, to keep it ticking on, because you've got your bills to pay. So it only fell to me to do it for myself. Yeah. And that selfishness, I think, has kept going. The work with Andrew's helped because it gives that other resource to draw on. Nobody's a designer down there. But they are a pair of eyes and feet on the ground. And
so I assume with that, unlike you being a sole practitioner, I assume with that, there's always work ongoing that you're involved with that you don't necessarily need to spend time on.
Of course, my scale of things, let's say I issue 8-10 invoices a month. Yeah. There's VAT returns, there's corporation tax, end of year, all that sort of stuff. You do what you hope other clients do, is you employ a specialist. So all that element of the works I devolve to somebody else. That leaves me with the twofold bit of doing the work and then finding the next bit of work. The bit I'm bad at, but equally I've not had to do much of, is look for other work.
Yeah.
So from a business planning point of view, that has been done very poorly, and anybody that's in marketing and PR would slap your wrist, because we're now finding that we're trying to play catch up because we feel we should.
But yeah, this is something I was told as I was leaving Mac, was you're not going to be able to be as productive as you think you are, because the company does all this business development. And you think, But for me, business development, and we do very, very little of it here. We do the odd careers fair, if you can call that business development. And me and Michael go to the odd car thing, which is pure selfishness and no business development, intention. But for us, it's doing a great job every single time. Doing the best job you possibly can for a client every single time has led to this growth where, and in the education sector, they all get together. They all
word of mouth,
If you're terrible, everyone will know you're terrible. If you're great, everyone will know you're great. And you can put people in contact with people. So we had an inquiry out on the East Coast. We said, if you can speak to our client in York, they'll let you know how we work, good, bad, indifferent. We hope good. We have a really good working relationship. They just turned around and went, we know. We've spoken to him about you already. That's why we've come to you.
I think that business model is, as we said before, it's reactive. It's been respectful and relative on fees. It's being honest with them so that they know that they're getting a small business. And then, as you said, I've had inquiries about house extensions or clients, and so it's not for me, but I know somebody that can. So Kev, or do you know an engineer? So the group that we work with, or another surveyor like you, or contract admin. And I think there's that informal network goes back to people you can trust to do the job, because you don't want to recommend somebody and then find out that they trip over or don't deliver what was expected.
And it seems counterintuitive, doesn't it, to recommend someone else as a form of business development for yourself. But they'll always remember that. They'll always say, well, I rang Andrew first, but he couldn't help me. But he did put me on to someone else, so why don't you ring Andrew? Because he might be able to help.
Yeah, and I think that, again, it's that, I think, professionalism that you don't hoard everything. There is enough to go around if you're the right person to deal with that problem, and you wouldn't put a big practice onto a tiny little extension. That's pointless.
We always say this, that we don't have competition. Very hard to get your head out of that, because it's drilled into you through years of being in a professional practice.
Absolutely, yeah.
But we don't have there's enough work out there for everyone to be busy to whatever extent they want to be busy, and to get along with each other. You don't need to berate each other over who does what best.
No, absolutely. But it goes back to the bit you first asked about, that sort of business planning and business model, is that the split. What we're now looking at in the South bit is we have no presence on LinkedIn. We have no Instagram. We have a website that we've just about hooked off the ground. Does anybody look at it? Has anybody actioned anything off of what they've seen? And and there'll be lots of people who have a comment on whether that's right or wrong. Yeah. It's the model that works for us at the moment, I suppose, until it doesn't.
Yeah, but it works both ways, because obviously you're here on our podcast. Not every consultancy has a podcast.
Absolutely.
Not every consultancy litters LinkedIn like we do. Yeah. But there are metrics you can measure and all that, but who's to know which one is right? You're busy with ECP. Yeah. You've got work in the pipeline ongoing. You're employing people. You're keeping very busy, and you're not doing any of that, which means that you've got more time to do it. Whereas I take time out my day to do things like this. All of the social media bits that we do, all the video work that we do, takes time. It's always hard to weigh up, could we just spend that time doing more fee earning work? Where that balance lies.
Absolutely. I can't give you obviously I can't give you a comment because I've not done it. I've watched others and yourself particularly. It's great to see the material that comes out, because it gives people an insight as to what you do. Yeah. I think that's valuable, and you have a comment and you've got something to say. I'm not a big fan of the bragging. Look at my great, I've done this, this and this. If there's I've been to see this, this is what I've learned. Yeah. I think that's invaluable for everybody in the industry.
It's really hard to do though, because in employment and in other traditional practices, that's what you're told to do. Case studies, which is just bragging about your last project, which isn't the most valuable thing to be posting. And before people jump on my back, we post case studies, and we brag about what we're doing, but we try to mix in why we're doing it, what we've enjoyed about doing it, what the challenges were, and what the outcome was.
Exactly.
It's a difficult balance. Running two businesses, then, for me, that sounds like hard work.
It is, to a point, but to be fair, the balance of the stuff in the South Andrew drives. Yeah. Because it springboards.
Is that the business function that he drives?
Yes. Yeah. And I think the relationships there are integral to his region, and the inquiries come to him, and I piggyback him. And the reason we did it is we were working together a bit like we do, which is as a sub-consultant, but there was a drive to offer a one-stop shop. Yeah. And there are numerous other TLAs in the area who do a similar thing. But when you drill down behind it, they take a huge fee. Yeah. And the outcome is not as good as we think it could be. And we've
Is that because the relationships between the teams aren't as tight because they're subbing everyone in?
Yes. I think the skill set that's used down there, it's a quick hit. It's a 15% fee of construction value, typically. Compare that to what it's like up here. Yeah. That's PMQS and some element of design. And you think what the school are actually getting value for money is not very good.
Yeah, a fraction.
Now, we don't undercut, but we come up and we offer more, because we end up with 2 fully qualified people, a team of 2 or 3 behind. and we can
Is
do...
that just having a more agile practice?
Possibly. I'm not saying it's any different to anybody else. Others do it. We just seem to have hit a network of people across the schools, as you said. You look onto any of the threads of the business managers, half a dozen schools, and suddenly you're on a thread that you didn't know you were, and the call comes in from somebody a couple of months later. Yeah. So there's that network of people I think is very valuable. We haven't tripped up yet. We've managed to service it. It means some long journeys up and down the motorway. But the bit I do enjoy, I suppose, let's look at the positives, is that as a sole practitioner, I miss the practice element. Yeah. The dialogue with the banter in the office. Yeah. I've got my room, my work, my screens and my connectivity with everybody, and the Teams is great, but there's a lovely flexibility in that. I can work early, finish late, go on my bike, do what I want to do. But there is the dialogue and the learning that you miss with sitting in an office solving a problem. Yeah.
We found that here. Everyone in the office today could be working from home. It's 100% flexible working. If they want to work from home, they can. But you've got two guys that are doing their APC, two guys that are finishing off their degrees. Yeah. And, myself sat there, chartered, Ian, long in the tooth, surveyor, goes out and sees lots of things. The amount you learn sat in the office.
That's right. Yeah.
It's just staggering. And I think everyone picks up on that. So everyone is always in the office.
You create a dynamic. Yes, you can be more efficient sat at your home, head down, churning it away. But that's why the bit in the south has been quite refreshing, because there is an office. I've got a base down there. I've got people. We can have a social side.
Stand by the printer and
natter. You can have a natter, and the Rickmansworth is a lovely little place. There's pubs nearby. Everybody likes to have a beer. It's a fun environment, and although they're not, I've only been together with about 18 months formally. There's enough knowledge there and enough sociability that you can not be too blinkered in what you do. Yeah. And I've learned about rack. From other surveyors. I've learned about party wall, which I never would have done. Valuations, stuff that is a whole new element, is my CPD in some respects, which I wouldn't ever come across. So there is ultimately it's I suppose I'll end up focusing more on that. The problem is we can't deliver EPC in the north because it just doesn't work with the travel. It's centric, and I don't think if I had that sort of project, it'd be with you. Yeah. Because you'll have swept all that up, in the Yorkshire region, it'll all be yours.
Everyone would have seen us on LinkedIn.
Yeah, exactly. Nobody's going to come to me for a condition survey. So there are some elements up here which are continuity of multi-academy trusts. Bradford Grammar School being one as an independent school, which have been a fantastic client. The John Taylor Matt, which is continuing to deliver the Coburn Trust. Yeah. Those are projects that are here and will continue to run through. And then we've got the stuff that we're doing together with the diocese. Yeah. The next podcast on Glidegate. Yeah. So there are elements up here.
What do you see the benefits then? Because we've hit on the me and you work together. That tends to be either me going in with you with one of your clients, and I give you a real effective fee just to plug in, just to fill those bits. As the sort of QS, contract admin, that function. And then on other projects, I say, Andrew, and you do it the other way. Yeah. You come under us, and it works both ways. What do you see the benefits of either, of that being a separate subcontracted function or the same business? Or is it just, does the overarching business setup not make a great difference?
I think it's that client perception of what they're getting from you or me. So let's take the multi-academy trust ones where you've come in under me as a sub. Yeah. They still call you or Stephen or whoever it might be for that answer, and they have confidence that I'll deal with the day-to-day problems. Yeah. So if it was, I can't think of the acronym of Gate and Bar and Andrew Southey architect, but whatever that would be. Yeah, it'd be long. I think that is the synergy there between us and in terms of individuals means that I'm happily can draw a drawing and it can have a Gate and Bar logo on the title block, or vice versa, that I'm putting stuff through Andrew Southey that's got Gate and Bar on it. It doesn't overly matter, and I think as long as there's a integrity in what you give and the professionalism behind it, I think as the client understands they're getting the good service.
Yeah.
I think there's flexibility here. I think if you had a workload, and we've talked about it before, do you need to go the same way as EPC? Would you have a full-time designer? Doesn't have to be an architect, it could be a technician.
Yeah.
You do works now where you bring me in and some of the work you already know how it's going to go together. You know the answers to it. You've partly designed it. It might have gone in for planning. You know that process well enough to be able to deliver it.
Yeah.
Could you do the same thing?
Well, yeah.
There's another podcast in that, isn't there?
Yeah, and we've thought about it. And it's that way up between the benefit of plugging you in and your expertise. If we were to try and replicate anything like that, it comes at a cost.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, and you don't need it full time, perhaps, either.
Yeah, and there's a crossover between, us using CAD, I won't say doing design, but us doing design elements and bringing yourself in, or if it's a domestic job, bringing another architect in. And it's, would we need...
I don't know. It goes back to that growth thing. Do we? There's a lovely flexibility in being able to do bits of work with you, bits of work in the south, bits of work for myself, and that keeps that variety going. I think you go back to the bigger practices where you're doing a similar role day to day with variety, but you're going to have to deal with HR, accounts, invoicing, filing your emails. If I don't want to file my emails, I won't file my emails. I'm allowed to do that for myself. It's a privilege of being self-employed.
I'm not allowed to do that anymore. We use OneDrive, and I say, is OneDrive up to date? And everyone just goes, well, have you updated OneDrive? I'm going, well, I haven't. But
there's an element of self-discipline, and I know there's your professional code and the things you have to do to be efficient. So if I know my emails are all over the place, I can't then find that information. So there's a level of self-imposed efficiency that you have to do. But I think that flexibility to work with different people in a different guise. If I was working with Andrew in his previous, in his the parent business, I'd still plug into him in the same way I plug in with yours.
Anyway, we missed a really good bit.
Have we?
Yeah. Setting up and having the knowledge to set up.
Oh yeah. Oh yes.
Because I used an advisor.
Did you?
Sorry, are we recording? All right, we'll just use that.
Did you?
Yeah. I used Adventure, which was like an EU-funded business setup coach. And I say used, I had someone that made me write a business plan.
Right.
Did you write a business plan?
No.
Made me write a business plan, which on another episode I'll get out and read, because it's a great read, as you can imagine. Made me write a business plan, reviewed it a few times, and basically told me nothing on how to actually set up a business. And there's very little, and I don't know why it might be on purpose, but I think there's very little from our professional bodies to assist with it. I think the RICS and the APC has always had this sort of tag on the end of, when you're successful and you're chartered, you can set up a chartered practice and the things you might need to put in place for that minimum PI and those bits. It doesn't go into the nitty-gritty of accounting, cash flow, the bits that actually you need to make sure you get right. Yeah.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think I suppose having been exposed to it through the other practices, I was aware of what you need to do to have a business.
Yeah.
To be fair to the RIBA, there is an extensive amount of online information. There are toolkits for small businesses, for SMEs. There are countless templates and things that you can do, but it relies on you to know that they're there. There's nobody to teach you it. So, back to the schools of architecture, business forms been in practice. There's a practice management, well, they used to be part of the exam, which probably was out of date when it was even written.
Yeah.
And unless you're exposed to it or asked the questions when you're in business, you probably wouldn't find out. So if you left architecture school and went to set up on your own, wow, what a learning curve that would be.
Yeah.
However, there are a lot of online resources, and there were people that I knew that put me in touch with people that said, you need to do X, Y, and Z.
The one thing that made a lot of things clear for me was an accountant.
Mm.
I went for probably a surprising amount of time without an accountant.
Right.
So I set up the business on Company's House myself, not through an accountant.
Yeah, I did.
Lots of people do.
Yeah.
You sort of fudge that through and make sure you've got the right designation and bits like that on there. I can't remember who or what it was, but I was like, well, I'm gonna need an accountant here. So I rang around a few and found a very good one that are now opposite us in our office.
In the office, yeah.
And I think I learnt more from sitting down and talking to the accountant, and even over emails, than I did in the sort of business element of setting up a business.
Yeah.
You know, there's all these things that you need to do. You need to, are we going to be VAT registered? This is what you need to know. This is the threshold.
Yeah.
Are you going to go over that? If you think you're anywhere close to it, just set up now.
Yeah, that's right.
Get it all done from the beginning.
Yeah.
All those bits, that are just, how do you want to pay yourself?
Yeah.
That's an important one.
Yeah.
How you set up the business in terms of shareholders and who's involved, the people that are listed on Company's House.
Yeah.
It
is a minefield, isn't it?
There's a lot of information.
Yeah.
And and my piece of advice to anyone would just be, find a good accountant that knows startups. And or preferably knows your field, so has other clients that are in the construction world, the property world.
Yeah, absolutely. And that was exactly the same. I just ended up having a conversation with a financial advisor based on what I was doing at the time, and he said, what are you going to do and how are you going to do it? And I went, I have no idea. And he put me in touch with an accountant who I'm with. What's nice about them is we use software, we use a QuickBooks format, which allows you to go back to time, generate invoices, track your money, and then you pay them a service to access that and generate your accounts.
Yeah, ours is exactly the same, but we use Xero.
Yeah. And gone are the days, yes, I keep my own spreadsheet of who, what and when and roughly what's coming in and out, so you've got an idea of cash flow. But all the nitty-gritties, back of house with somebody else I input in.
I did that. I had 2 sheets running, and we've got our fee sheet, which tells you when you're billing stuff. I had a cash flow forecast going of all the outgoing, all the all what's going. And it got to the point where I was just replicating what was on Xero.
Yes.
So I just threw that in the bin, and now we just use Xero. And if someone had told me that from the beginning, just to say, don't bother with all your Excel spreadsheets, you dinosaur. It's all online now.
It is. And it's all the back end stuff that they can pull out, from your VAT assessment to your corporation tax to your mileage, all the stuff that the only thing I have to try and keep up with is scanning my receipts in and forwarding on the invoices.
I've got until the 10th, so I've got a couple of days to get mine up to date.
But it's the quickest way. Yes, I pay a premium for it, but that is my time I'm not spending doing that, which gives me the ability to do the fee earning bit, which comes back to assessing your hours and what you do to be able to invoice off the back of it.
Yeah, one big thing that I did know about it in the practice in York that I worked for, and certainly at Mac, was this overdue invoices spreadsheet that used to come around every month on how many clients hadn't paid. And the number at the bottom was eye-watering. And I was thinking, what if that happens to me? What if nobody pays the invoices? I just broadly, and I don't know why I assumed it, because that list that got sent round at a former practice, none of my jobs were ever on it. I just, you just sort of think, God, what?
Well, I'm going to say, touch wood, never happened to me yet. And partly is because the choice of the client, the schools I've always found are a client that honours what they've engaged you to do.
Yeah.
And I think that is one of the, they're nice people to work with. They are usually very respectful of you being the professional and taking your advice for what it is. They're paying for your advice. And I try to make sure that the invoices I give are clearly set out, when they are going to be invoiced, what they're for, and they're always reasonable as a percentage of what the business is.
We had the discussion in the office on a particularly challenging residential scheme that we're working on at the moment. We've been asked to look at an additional piece of work alongside the main contract, and we had the discussion in the office of doing it on an hourly rate. I said, great, in theory, hourly rate, fine, you cover all your time, so you charge for every hour you spend on it, you make a record of your hours.
Yeah.
In theory, sounds lovely. From the client's perspective, from the beginning, they don't know how much it's going to cost. Yep. They'll get a bill at the end, middle, end of the month, whatever it is, and they'll just go, what? Why have you spent that much time?
I didn't authorise you for that.
Yeah. And I think to date we've never done an hourly rate job. And it's setting up the jobs, isn't it, and setting up the client base not to avoid it happening, just to make sure.
I think it's that transparency that they know what they're paying for at the end of the job, and for them to plan from their budgets, for which their premises committee will have a budget of X. Yeah. They want to know what's the building, what's the fees, what's the statutory authority fees, allowances. So it's transparent, and again, we're experienced enough to know roughly that a X number of classrooms is going to cost X amount of money. The days of the fee scale percentages are long gone. I don't think I've got any clients that ask for percentages. We always give a fixed, and the only caveat really is that if the job changes rapidly or expansively to do bigger or smaller, we'll take a view on the fees.
Yeah. So we're jumping into now, we fee everything, which is quite good, because that, again, you get some exposure to it in employment, and you probably had more than me because you were, up there in the business, generating the sort of fees and everything. We do percentage fees,
right?
But for a slightly different reason. All of our SCA work, so our school condition allocation, the trust get a lump of money every year, and they have to allocate it over their 5, 10, 15 sites. Yeah. We do that on a percentage because we know they've got £1 million that they need to spend on their buildings. We don't know if that's 10 jobs, 20 jobs, 2 jobs. It could change dramatically. And for their business planning, they find it easier just to have a percentage. They know exactly what their budgets are straight away before they've even allocated.
That's the fees.
Before they've allocated what projects we're doing and where. Yeah. And that gives us the flexibility to put in that time up front and just go, it doesn't matter if we're doing a 15 grand toilet refurb or a £500,000 roofing job. Yeah. We're there to deliver that sum of work however it is best delivered for the trust, not for our own back pocket. And that's the only one we do on a percentage fee. Yeah. Everything else is worked out, how much time we cover it off. And we've been asked the question before, and people have gone, what if you get it wrong? What if you think it's going to take 15 hours and put your rate against it, and it takes 30 hours? Yeah. We just go, well, it takes 30 hours.
Yeah, and that's the loss. Yeah. There's plenty of jobs which are profitable and a fair percentage that aren't. Yeah. But again, it goes back to long-term investment in the relationship. I'd love to charge for the hour each time I go down or pick up the call, or become like a solicitor and wow, you would really be profitable. But I think that's not what's expected, and probably leads into how the professions are viewed by the clients and what your value is. You'll pay premium for your dentist, premium for your solicitor. Will you pay premium for the person that designs the building that you're going to live in? There's the question. Yeah, it's one I have opinions on, but the value of what you are in the industry has changed quite dramatically in the last sort of 15, 20 years. And how you react to that and what you charge for your time varies, I think, depending on who your client is. Yeah, it does massively. Yeah, I think the only one that we've ever had to chase, and it annoyed me actually because it was a pre-acquisition residential survey. So we went out, did a full survey of this property, found significant hidden issues,
sent him the report, sent him the invoice. I'm not proceeding with the property because of your report.
Yeah.
But because I'm not proceeding with the property, I don't want to spend any money on it, so I'm not paying your invoice. I just thought, the only reason you're not proceeding with the property and not getting yourself into 300 grand's worth of repairs is because of our measly £1,000 report.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it was so... And I can half see it from their perspective. And anyway,
Annoying.
it did get paid. We've never not been paid on any invoice. And it took a very nicely worded email from our office manager just to say we're very disappointed in your approach to this.
Excellent.
Paid.
Yeah, I there are. Again, it goes back to the value of what you do and how you do it. So for the schools, when they say, "Oh, can you just draw me a," like you got on the board, "Can you just draw me a quick layout?" Yeah. Well, actually, that's all my ideas for your project given away for free.
Yeah.
Now, if I know that's going to then lead into the project, I don't mind. But if it's just speculatively trawling to take your ideas to give to someone else, that's not appropriate. Yeah. Now, thankfully, again, going back to the clients and the schools, they don't do that. If they're engaging with you, that's because they want to work with you. And that I don't mind doing, because you need to dangle something in front of them. It's a visual thing you're trying to sell.
And I don't know about you, but we look at the business holistically. And I'm not saying that we ignore where we lose money. We know where we lose money. We know which projects have gone well and we make a bit of money. But we look at the business holistically and just go, as a year, as a quarter, as a half year, it's worked. We've paid everyone. We've made a bit of profit. Yeah. I always go back to, we've paid for the Christmas do. That's what everyone looks forward to.
Yeah, it does. Yeah.
Great, done. Yeah. But do you do that to the detriment of, as a sole practitioner, of your time? Do you look at it going, another good year, and
I'm still here,
and you keep spending these lost hours almost.
There are, and I'm aware of what I did in other practices about what is a loss and how you measure your time, and a lot of it's now experience. I base a fee on how I know who the client is, who the contractor might be, where the site is, and you make a judgment. Yeah. Some are good and some are definitely not so good. But again, rounded over the period of time, they work.
Yeah.
Now, again, being critical, I should be more critical of that and not do certain things. But I find I am doing certain things, going to extra meetings that I know is going to take me an hour to drive there, or at least, or like yesterday, 3 hours there, 3 hour meeting and 3.5 hours home for no extra fee.
Yeah.
Now, that's a whole day's work there, not being able to invoice. But I know it's part of a bigger picture that's coming through. So there's an element of speculation on that. There's better analysis that could be done.
Yeah. But to me, that's that business acumen that you're not taught and can't be taught to some extent, is where to pitch your fees, which projects are worth going after, how much dead time you need to spend on each client, each project to add value, secure the job in some instances, not all. It's making that balance of your time is the business, isn't it?
Yeah, and I'm really I admire people who know that they want to do certain things in the business, having not been taught it, but they have a drive to be the best architectural practice in Leeds.
Yeah,
getting to a certain number, hitting the right sort of markets of work, because there's great PR off of it as well as potential profit.
Yeah.
I haven't got that acumen to be able to do that. Mine's a continuation of what I've always done, hopefully with an integrity that people want to come back and use you. And you have a great chat and you go out on your bike and you have a beer and you do those other things that go with it.
Yeah.
The networking side of it, I don't do.
No. Is that a big business thing? Are we missing out on that?
I don't know. There are things that go on, I understand, from in Leeds that, and people I know, are you going to come to this? Well, no. What am I going to actually physically get out of it?
I was dragged to a few of them in Leeds.
Oh, yeah. Well, we did a few in,
we've done a few together. And you meet the business development manager. And I have nothing against business development managers. But when you're a boring building surveyor or a boring architect, you just want to talk about
architecture,
buildings.
architecture and building. Yeah, exactly. You do.
And you don't want to talk about, well,
No.
these are the services we can offer you. It's well, God, right.
And you tend to see the same groups of people at the same events.
It's a circuit, especially in Leeds.
Yeah. But again, it's time. If I had the time to do it, maybe. I've never had a lead. I've never had a real job come out of any of those. I suppose it's getting your face known and being on the lips of people if they are a recommendation being floating around, but not a driver for me.
So we've got to wrap up at some point because this will get edited down, but we've been sat here for quite a while, nattering. Sorry, Michael.
Yeah, sorry, Michael.
I don't know edit. If you had to give advice to anyone, maybe not sat in your position, because to some extent you were forced to sort of go on your own, setting up an architecture practice, if you had to give a couple of bullet points on what to get right.
I think I would advise that anybody that comes out of training, let's say, because the architectural profession training is going to change, it's going to be condensed, you're going to need to get exposed to reality. And that's good or bad. You need to know what you do and don't want to do.
This is what I touched on in the first episode, is you need to understand the breadth of what you know.
Absolutely.
And the breadth of what you don't know.
Yes. And there are good and bad things in both our professions. There's a wide range. As you come out of that little point of being let's call yourself an architect, and you've been in some businesses, where are you going to go? Are you going to be a housing specialist or an education specialist or churches, or you're going to draw? That's all you're going to do.
Yeah.
You're going to be the ideas person.
So gain experience, find your pocket.
Find your
to
pocket.
sit in.
Yeah. And then, I think specialise is the right word. Go and be the best you can at that element of work and know it inside out. And some of that comes through research and some of that comes through exposure to the process. Then setting up on your own is probably a leap of, are you that person that's driven enough to want to do it differently from where you've been before? Can you offer something different?
Yeah.
Is there a niche that you can fit into? So there is business acumen that's needed. How you get that, is it through an advisor? Is it through talking to peers? That's to be explored. But I think
it built up through experience and
what you don't like.
Opening,
yeah.
Open,
know all the things that you don't like, the way businesses are controlled, and do it differently for yourself. And then start employing others and set up shared ownership, shared responsibility, shared responsibility being the key one, that if you put into it, you get something out. But if it goes wrong, you also take the hit. Drives everybody forward, and then be the best that you can be.
Yeah.
On the whole, I suppose, I don't regret it.
Yeah.
And that's probably the main exciting thing I can offer. I wouldn't go back now to practice, and I have been offered to go back and work in other practices. And there's
one of my contacts has recently done it, where he was set up for 3 and a bit years. He sent me an email the other day. I've found a practice.
A couple of people I know went back to practice, and I've thought about it because there'd be lots of nice things. Some of the security, working with the people. Holiday. Oh. But
we do go on holiday, but it's a different sort of holiday when you've...
again, clients, if you've got the relationship, you can explain what you're doing and you're on holiday. I'll answer the emails in a week or back end of the day if I get Wi-Fi. So, again, goes back to being transparent. But I think on the whole, it's been the right move. Yeah. It still remains exciting.
Yeah.
And that's probably, if I was bored, I might go and say I'm going to go and do hospitals because I want to learn something new.
Yeah.
And go and join a practice and do that. But at the moment, it stays as it is. There's the excitement of the stuff down south, which is evolving, and will probably continue to do so until I need a chauffeur to drive me up and down the M1.
That sounds nice.
Or a helicopter.
Until you can afford the
helicopter and the pilot to take me down there, yeah.
And then you'll still be working, won't you? Yeah, of course. And then one, depending on your answer, we'll leave it in or not. Biggest mistake you've made in your career? I won't say since setting up, but if there's anything you think, I shouldn't have done that, or at the time that you didn't know that that you look back on and go, if I didn't do that.
Oh, that's quite tricky. I think I wish I'd come out of SDA earlier than I did. I know it was forced on me at the end. I think
Did you tolerate it for a while?
I did, because all I'd ever known is working in a practice where you were one of a bigger group and there was the safety net. The safety net. And actually the safety net wasn't actually there, it was false. So the reliance on yourself, I suppose, working for other people, is that the rug can be pulled at any time. If you're in a big practice, unlikely. Small to mediums, it could happen, as we found out from contractors and consultants, very quickly. Cash is king, cash flow goes, everybody's out. Yeah. And that actually can happen far more readily.
And it doesn't matter where you are on that tree either.
No. And we've been through recession. There were redundancies, but fundamental change. And COVID was hit everybody in the same way. But personally, when that happens, you've got nothing other than yourself.
So when you say leave estate sooner, would that have been to set up on your own? Or
I would have. I wish I'd had the confidence, because it wasn't the right place. It gave me lots of positives and lots of people, but it wasn't the right place. So if I could go back, I would have said 2 or 3 years, because it would have been out of Halliday Clark, something new, connections to the south, and then go. And I wish I'd maybe done it a bit earlier. I might then have gone into setting up on my own with more people, because I think then I would have had the critical mass behind me to move forward as
rather than a dip in the market.
Rather than dip in the market and be on my own thinking, am I going to make it? Because the dip in the market didn't give me the confidence to go out there and go, yeah, we can be a 5-strong practice from day one.
Yeah, from the get-go. Yeah. Well, we'll wrap it up there. I hope everyone found it mildly interesting. You'll get the edited version, so it should be more interesting, more bite-sized than the 2.5 hours we've been here. Yeah, if you liked what we've spoken about here, have any questions or recommendations on what we put next, then leave us a comment, and thank you for listening. Thank you.